If you are observing the situation in the Middle East right now, it is evident that it is not a well-orchestrated military operation. Instead, it resembles a conflict spiraling in ways that no one in the White House seems willing to acknowledge or address. On one side, the United States is launching airstrikes on Iranian airports and missile factories. On the other side, credible intelligence reports from U.S. officials confirm that Russia, a nuclear-armed superpower, is actively providing Iran with the coordinates of American warships, aircraft, and military personnel, enabling Iran to target them with ballistic missiles and Shahed drones. Meanwhile, the President of the United States is holding a press conference discussing college athletes and their name, image, and likeness rights, dismissing questions about Russia's assistance in targeting Americans as stupid. Furthermore, his Treasury Secretary is easing sanctions on Russian oil. This does not appear to be a wartime administration effectively managing a crisis. Rather, it looks like a deliberate dismantling of American strategic credibility. The individual at the helm seems oblivious to the precariousness of the situation. In the following paragraphs, I will outline exactly what has transpired, why the Trump administration's reaction to Russian involvement contradicts fundamental wartime strategies, and how the geopolitical landscape today is markedly different from just a week ago. Before diving into the specifics, consider this. Imagine you are embroiled in a serious conflict where your livelihood and your family's safety are at stake. Then you discover that someone you've been accommodating, someone whose sanctions you've lifted and whose oil deals you've approved, is actively providing your adversary with the information needed to harm you. Would you reward that person? Would you relax restrictions on them? Would you dismiss inquiries about their involvement as trivial? Keep that thought in mind, as it mirrors precisely what this administration has done. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Does this seem like a government committed to protecting its service members, or does it suggest something entirely different? To fully grasp how we reached this critical juncture, let's rewind a bit. When the Trump administration initiated what it termed Operation Epic Fury against Iran, its objectives were explicit: neutralize Iran's missile capabilities, dismantle its drone production infrastructure, and force a surrender. The administration projected overwhelming force and anticipated rapid results, conveying a message that Iran would be decisively defeated. However, it appears that the administration either failed to foresee or chose to ignore the fact that this would not remain a two-party conflict. Once American bombs began falling on Iranian territory, a chain reaction was set in motion. Faced with an existential military threat, Iran turned to its strategic allies, who promptly responded. Russia, having significantly deepened its ties with Iran through military cooperation during the Ukraine conflict, reportedly began supplying something far more perilous than just weaponry. It started providing intelligence and targeting data detailing the precise locations of American warships, aircraft, and personnel. There are also indications that China is offering support to Iran, although the specifics of Beijing's involvement are less clear. What was initially presented to the American public as a decisive and contained military action has evolved into what analysts increasingly describe as a multifaceted strategic entanglement involving two nuclear-armed powers now operating on the opposing side. Let's examine three key pieces of evidence that highlight how this situation is unfolding and why the administration's response is concerning. The Washington Post published a report citing 3 U.S. officials familiar with the intelligence, confirming that Russia has been providing Iran with the locations of American military assets in the Middle East, including U.S. warships and aircraft. The officials spoke on the condition of anonymity due to the sensitive nature of the information. When the Post reached out to Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, he declined to comment. This is not mere speculation from anonymous social media accounts. It is confirmed by U.S. officials and reported by one of the country's most reputable newspapers, met with a notable silence from Moscow. The Post characterized this as the first indication that another major U.S. adversary is actively participating in the conflict, noting that this involves one of America's primary nuclear-armed competitors with, and I quote, exquisite intelligence capabilities. In simple terms, Russia is assisting Iran in targeting Americans, and the administration's reaction to this revelation is unprecedented by any historical standards for a wartime government. Coinciding with the emergence of these intelligence reports, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced the easing of sanctions on Russian oil. The administration granted India permission to resume purchasing sanctioned Russian crude oil, which India had previously agreed to stop buying. Bessent framed this as a temporary measure to alleviate global supply issues amid the conflict. However, he went further, suggesting that the Treasury Department might consider unsanctioning additional Russian oil, indicating that there are hundreds of millions of barrels of sanctioned crude currently in transit that could be released. At the very moment U.S. intelligence confirms that Russia is providing targeting data to assist Iran in striking American military assets, the U.S. Treasury is lifting economic pressure on Russia, handing Moscow a substantial financial boost as oil prices surge due to the very conflict Russia is helping to escalate. As one veteran observer pointed out, we have multiple reports that Russia is aiding Iran in targeting our troops, and these idiots are easing sanctions. What are we doing here? Who are our service members risking their lives for? This is not a rhetorical question. It demands an answer. When Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy directly questioned President Trump about reports of Russia aiding Iran in targeting American forces, the president's response was not to address the intelligence or reassure the public. Instead, he attacked the question itself, stating, "I have a lot of respect for you. You have always been very nice to me. What a stupid question that is to be asking at this time." The president dismissed a question regarding a nuclear-armed adversary assisting an enemy in targeting American forces as stupid. When White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about the same reports, her response was that whether or not this occurred, frankly, it does not really matter. Similarly, Republican Congressman Don Bacon offered a dismissive reply. In any previous administration, confirmed intelligence that a major adversary was aiding and targeting American forces would have prompted an immediate and forceful response. Instead, questions were belittled, and the matter was deemed insignificant. For any service member deployed in that region, it must be disheartening to hear the commander-in-chief label concerns about a foreign power helping their enemy as trivial, or to be told by their government that it does not matter. If this narrative is connecting dots you haven't seen assembled elsewhere, you are already ahead of most observers. Hit subscribe now. This situation is evolving too quickly for any single outlet to track effectively, and you'll want to be informed as new developments arise. Now let's draw a contrast that encapsulates this moment, revealing something fundamentally flawed. A competent wartime leader faced with confirmed intelligence that a nuclear-armed power is aiding an enemy in targeting American forces would take several immediate actions: publicly acknowledge the intelligence, issue a direct warning to the adversary, increase economic pressure, rally allies, and reassure deployed service members and their families. This administration has done the exact opposite. Instead of acknowledging the intelligence, they dismissed the question. Rather than warning Russia, they eased sanctions. Instead of rallying allies, the president held a press conference about college sports. Instead of reassuring troops, the press secretary stated it does not matter. Meanwhile, as all of this unfolded, Bessent announced that the largest bombing campaign against Iran was set to commence, all while simultaneously enriching Russia. The administration is escalating the conflict with one hand while rewarding the nation aiding the enemy with the other. It appears that adversaries are coordinating their efforts. Russia provides targeting intelligence, Iran launches drones and missiles, and China offers additional support. In contrast, the United States responds by lifting sanctions on Russian oil and dismissing inquiries about the situation as trivial. One side is working in concert, the other is mired in contradictions. You don't need a PhD in international relations to recognize this imbalance. So what does this mean for you? It indicates that the Strait of Hormuz remains effectively disrupted, leading to rising oil prices, which in turn causes gas prices at your local station to spike. It signifies that the conflict is expanding rather than contracting, resulting in economic shockwaves that will ripple through supply chains, energy markets, and household budgets for months to come. If Russia faces no repercussions for assisting in targeting American forces, a dangerous precedent is set. Any adversary can engage indirectly in a conflict against the United States without fear of retaliation. Moreover, it means American service members are operating in an environment where a nuclear-armed power is actively aiding the enemy in aiming at them, while their own government trivializes concerns regarding their safety. Additionally, the administration has simultaneously rescinded the EPA's endangerment finding, which served as the legal basis for regulating greenhouse gas emissions under the Clean Air Act. According to analysis from the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, this rollback jeopardizes protections linked to reducing childhood asthma, heart disease, and premature mortality. For anyone who believed in the promise of making America healthier again, this is the stark policy reality behind that slogan. Let me outline 3 potential scenarios for the future, as the path forward is not a straight line, but rather a branching set of possibilities, each with significant consequences. The first scenario is a face-saving exit. The administration privately acknowledges that the conflict has escalated beyond expectations. Through back-channel communications, a de facto ceasefire is established. Trump declares victory, claiming that Iran has been defeated, framing whatever outcome emerges as unconditional surrender, regardless of the actual terms. Leavitt has already hinted at this framing, suggesting that unconditional surrender means whatever the president determines it means, whether Iran agrees or not. Gas prices eventually stabilize, and the news cycle moves on. However, the underlying damage, the precedent that Russia can assist in targeting Americans without facing consequences, remains etched in the geopolitical record. The second scenario is a widening spiral. Russia's involvement deepens, and China's role becomes more pronounced. Regional actors are drawn into the fray, transforming the conflict from a bilateral confrontation into a broader great power entanglement involving multiple nuclear-armed states on opposing sides. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed, causing oil prices to soar beyond market predictions. The economic fallout begins to impact global trade, food prices, and financial markets. Allied nations may distance themselves, unwilling to be dragged into an escalation that the administration cannot or will not control. The third scenario is the ground war. This is the scenario that few wish to acknowledge, yet NBC has reported that Trump has privately expressed serious interest in deploying a limited number of U.S. ground troops in Iran for specific strategic missions. While no orders have been given, the mere discussion of such actions at the presidential level, especially while Russia is actively aiding Iran in targeting American forces, sanctions on Russia are being lifted, and the administration dismisses questions about these issues as trivial, represents perhaps the most perilous turning point in American foreign policy in a generation. Ground troops in a nation where a nuclear-armed adversary is providing targeting intelligence to the opposing side could have dire implications. Ultimately, the relationship between the United States and its own strategic credibility will never be the same after this sequence of events. Even if the conflict were to end tomorrow, the lesson will have been learned by every nation across the globe. Russia assisted in targeting American forces, and the United States eased sanctions on Russia. This will be part of the historical record, and both allies and adversaries will remember it. In future crises, every nation will calculate their responses accordingly. The core lesson is straightforward. When your government dismisses concerns about your safety as trivial, when it claims intelligence regarding threats to your forces is inconsequential, and when it rewards the country aiding your enemy while escalating the conflict, the issue is no longer merely about foreign policy. It becomes a matter of basic competence and loyalty to those who serve in uniform. So, I leave you with this. Did this administration stumble into a strategic disaster, or did it enter knowingly? Is the easing of sanctions on Russia, while it helps target Americans, a grave miscalculation, or is it indicative of something more sinister? And if your government tells you that a question regarding your safety is a stupid one, what does that reveal about whom they are truly serving? I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe, because the next chapter, whether it involves ground troops, deeper Russian involvement, or a frantic search for a face-saving exit, is approaching rapidly. This story is not slowing down, so don't look away. This content serves as commentary and analysis for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial, legal, or geopolitical advice. Consult qualified experts before making any decisions based on the topics discussed.